From the Middle East to Europe, and in particular to France, where we look at the increasingly serious problem of alcoholism. It's a problem which begins in places like this, the peaceful, gently rolling slopes of the Bordeaux vineyards. Wine, which makes glad the heart of man, has been appreciated in France since time immemorial, and will no doubt continue to be as long as there are Frenchmen capable of raising a glass. Wine is, in fact, an integral part of French civilization, an essential accompaniment to the fine food for which the country is also renowned. No country could have wished for more persuasive ambassadors than the wine exports which have carried the name of France all over the globe. The trouble is that Frenchmen are now drinking wine and other alcoholic drinks in quantities that are beginning to show their effects in the national health statistics. According to the World Health Organization, the average yearly consumption of alcohol in France is 28 litres per head, twice as high as in Western Germany and 40% higher than in Italy, another great wine-growing country. France has some 2 million registered alcoholics, but the number of people with a serious alcoholic problem is much greater. This excerpt from a French anti-alcohol propaganda film sets out to show the atmosphere in one of these troubled households. Claude, an apprentice motor mechanic, is planning an evening out, but he's undecided between a workout at the local athletic ground or a few glasses in the nearest bar. Meanwhile, mealtime approaches and the whole family awaits the arrival of father. Father drinks, and so mealtimes are frequently noisy, quarrelsome affairs.
Qu'est-ce que tu dis? Ah ben c'est un peu fort, enfin. Mais enfin, tout camion se crée pour ces moutards, pour leur donner un peu de bien-être, et voilà comment ils vous répondent.
Manger dedans, ça va refroidir.
Non, j'ai pas faim, moi.
Moi non plus.
Non, j'en dis, hein. Tiens, bois un coup, ça te donnera un peu d'appétit. Allez, ton verre, Claude. Eh ben, t'es pas fou, tu m'en fais renverser.
Tu devrais pas en donner au petit, c'est pas bon pour lui.
Ah ben, un verre de vin, ça n'a jamais fait de mal à personne, hein.
Seulement la nuit, il fait des cauchemars, le matin, il peut plus se lever.
C'est pas pareil, c'est parce qu'il est nerveux.
Vous avez pas fini, non?
Moi, je vais me coucher. Bonsoir. Eh ben, qu'est-ce qu'il a, celui-là, encore?
Annoyed by his father's bad temper, the boy goes out to the sports ground, but it's not long before he finds himself in the bar room with some hard-drinking friends. A few drinks later, he and a friend are on their way to another bar. They very nearly don't make it. This escape was purely fictional. The truth is that every year something like 100,000 people are killed or injured on French roads as a result of accidents caused by drunken driving. Deaths alone stand at over 13,000 a year, almost the same as for Japan, a country with twice France's population. About a third of the deaths are attributed to alcohol. In spite of this, French legislators have been slow to tighten up drunken driving laws. A bill was presented to the Assembly earlier this year, but much of the sting was taken out before it was finally passed. The anti-alcohol movement is up against some pretty stiff opposition. There is, to begin with, the Frenchman's natural taste for wine, which no amount of campaigning will ever eradicate. But wine is also big business. Vines occupy 1/5 of all French farmland, and the industry as a whole occupies a central position in the economy. For the last 10 years, France has produced on average 60 million hectolitres of wine a year, an output which places it among the forefront of the world's wine producers, and second only to Italy within the common market. Production has in fact been so abundant that it's had to be restricted. Unlike their Italian counterparts, French wine growers are not free to extend their vineyards where they wish, but can only replant existing ones. Even so, exports of wine and other alcoholic drinks bring in nearly 2 billion francs a year. Not surprisingly, many groups within the wine industry dispute the findings of the anti-alcohol movement, which they accuse of being supported and encouraged by the soft drinks manufacturers. Unfortunately, the statistics relating to French alcoholism cannot be dismissed as misleading propaganda. Surveys made by the World Health Organization show that alcoholism kills more people in France than in all major Western industrialized countries put together. In 1965, the last year for which figures are available, alcoholism claimed 5,816 lives in France. That's more than twice as many as in the United States and 15 times as many as in Italy. On a population basis, the figures look even worse, with 12 deaths per 100,000 in France, compared with 1.4 in the United States and 0.1 in England and Wales. Researchers into other aspects of alcoholism have shown just how widely its effects are felt in French society. Absenteeism, for example, is increased threefold amongst heavy drinkers, and it's been estimated that no less than 12% of France's vast army of railwomen have a drinking problem that unfits them for positions of responsibility. Alcoholism is putting tremendous pressures onto the French health services. In Paris alone, more than a quarter of the general medical beds are occupied by alcoholics, who stay twice as long as other patients and who cost more to cure. As far as mental hospitals are concerned, 36% of all men admitted are alcoholics. What exactly are the effects of alcohol on the human body? To find out, we spoke to a specialist at a large Paris hospital, Professor Jean Lereboullet.
Ces complications dont je vais vous parler sont de deux ordres.
Professor Lereboullet explained that chronic alcoholism provokes two main sorts of disorders, those of the digestive system and those of the nervous system. As far as digestive problems are concerned, there's the risk of gastritis, which in the case of the alcoholic is similar to a certain form of anemic gastritis. This sort of gastritis is mainly due to a lack of the B12 vitamin, which is the direct result of alcoholic poisoning.
Un stade de plus, et nous avons déjà l'atteinte hépatique sous forme de la stéatose hépatique.
The next thing to be affected is the liver, which becomes enlarged and undergoes a fatty degeneration, rather similar to that seen in animals used in the production of foie gras. This condition can disappear if the patient stops drinking completely, but if he continues, much more serious complications follow.
Si le sujet continue à boire, eh bien alors nous absorbons des lésions beaucoup plus graves.
Cells in the liver are replaced by connective tissue, which is incapable of functioning on a glandular level. The result is alcoholic cirrhosis, which usually kills within a short space of time, either by severe digestive hemorrhage or liver failure resulting in a coma.
Hémorragie digestive extrêmement grave, soit du fait d'une grande insuffisance hépatique qui aboutit au coma hépatique. Les complications nerveuses sont peut-être encore plus fréquentes.
Disorders of the nervous system are perhaps even more common. They're of three main sorts: acute, subacute, and chronic.
Les complications aiguës.
Most important of the acute complications is delirium tremens, which is well known and which has been described, for example, in the novels of Émile Zola. The condition produces acute hallucinations, but the main danger comes from the fever and dehydration which accompany it.
Le délirium tremens, c'est un délire hallucinatoire aigu qui se complique, et ce qui en fait sa gravité, d'un très important syndrome neurovégétatif avec fièvre et déshydratation.
There was a time when delirium tremens was almost always fatal, but present-day treatments are usually successful. In the long term, however, the prospect is not so good, and the long-term mortality rate can be considered to be around 35%.
Mais le pronostic d'avenir en reste extrêmement sévère et on peut considérer actuellement que sa mortalité à longue échéance est d'environ 35%.
Among the chronic complications are those which affect the peripheral nerves. This is particularly true of alcoholic polyneuritis, a common ailment involving paralysis of the lower limbs, frequently with the most serious results.
Et qui se caractérise par une paralysie des membres inférieurs qui peut laisser des séquelles extrêmement graves.
The condition can be cured by vitamin therapy, but here again only on condition that the patient abstains from any sort of alcoholic drink. Unfortunately, relapses are extremely common, and the patient, who in this case is usually a woman, is soon on the way to more serious disorders.
Le malade, ou plutôt la malade, car c'est surtout chez les femmes que cela s'observe, se remet à boire et, de ce fait, évolue vers des complications plus graves.
Alongside polyneuritis, there are also disorders of the central nervous system which result in alcoholic dementia, which takes the form of what's termed a generalized pseudo-paralysis. These are the patients who are incapable of looking after themselves, who have only a vague notion of time or place, and who are fated to end their days in a psychiatric hospital.
Ils sont confus dans le temps et dans l'espace et qu'ils doivent absolument terminer leur jour dans un hôpital psychiatrique car ils sont incapables de vivre en société.
With such impressive facts to back them up, it might be thought that the opponents of alcoholism would be in a strong position to influence public opinion. In fact, they're only just learning how to be effective. Up till now, the only united front has been put up by the large wine and aperitif manufacturers, who've had considerable success in thwarting what little anti-alcohol legislation has passed the Assembly. The abstainers are now fighting back with nationwide campaigns aimed at informing the public of the dangers involved. Information centres such as this have been set up in Paris and various provincial centres. Another way in which the fight is now being carried into the other camp is the promotion of soft drink bars, which combine anti-alcohol propaganda with a practical on-the-spot alternative. Even the beer is non-alcoholic. It's only recently that the supporters of sobriety have started to grapple with their main stumbling block, which is that soft drinks have up till now been dearer than the cheapest glass of wine. Cafe owners are now being offered special discounts to encourage them to try and reverse this by making milk or fruit juice, for example, the cheapest item on their menu. It's still too early to say whether the campaign will succeed, but its supporters know that their only hope of doing so is to concentrate on getting their message across to the young. For most of the older generation, wine is part of the birthright of every Frenchman, and not many are likely to be shaken from that belief. The most the propagandists can hope for is to persuade them to go for quality rather than quantity.